dreams. That's what we're here for. Connecting dreams. It's what we're cheer for. Connecting dreams. Succeed if we want to. Let's vow right now to make our dreams come true.
Are you guys ready to hear from one of our scientists at the home office? This next speaker has traveled the world for us. He has been in many different countries for the USANA family, so regardless of where you're from, I'm sure you've seen him present over and over. Either that or you've seen him do some mountain biking stunts at the AP convention this last year. He is a great asset to the USANA family. He started in 2009 in the R&D department, and from there, in about 2014, he created his education and science group. How many of you guys have used Ask the Scientist? Yes, it's a very good resource for you and for your customers. So I definitely want you to make sure that you start utilizing that. If you're not, there's a lot of FAQs about Cellessentials on there, which may help you. In that time, he was able to create this group. He is a phenomenal speaker, especially about the products and helping you understand this information. And so he's going to be speaking to you about the technology of InCelligence. He graduated with his PhD in molecular and cellular biology, and also used to study the aging process at the Lining Pauling Institute. Please join me in welcoming to this stage our Executive Director of Health and Science Education, Dr. Brian Dixon.
Oh, thank you guys. I really appreciate you coming out, but I'm not sure if I should be offended or not. You chose me second. But just a little bit of housekeeping. If you heard my presentation just next door, it's going to be the exact same presentation. So what we'd really like to encourage people to do is spread themselves around and learn as much as you can this afternoon. So Dr. Spellman is speaking right next door on Cellessentials, and I'm going to focus exclusively on InCelligence, okay? So let's just get that out of the way. Now, you heard, if we can just get right into the deck, that'd be perfect. But you heard Lori talk about Ask the Scientist, and I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed in the number of applause that I heard. I wish everybody knew about Ask the Scientist. And I think you'll see, and maybe you feel it now just a little bit, maybe a little bit overwhelmed by everything you heard this morning. As amazing as it was, you still might be thinking, what is all of this? Well, we have this entire team that's here for you guys to help learn. So they're in the Ask the Scientist booth over in the Discovery Center. So please get your questions answered over there. They are amazing. We have a frequently asked questions page for Cellessentials and InCelligence that you can find and access right from the home page. So if you just go down right to the lower page fold, you'll see all the brand new FAQs. And Austin Weininger, the gentleman up in the upper right-hand corner of those slides, he's been working tirelessly for you guys to make sure that all happens. I also have another amazing announcement in how hard Austin's been working. But we've been hearing from you, Brian, gosh, we wish that Ask the Scientist was available in Spanish. We wish Ask the Scientist was available in French. And we wish Ask the Scientist was available in Chinese. Well, Kevin Guest came to me a little over a year ago, and he said, Brian, why is Ask the Scientist not available in Chinese? I said, if you give me just a small amount of money, we will make it happen. And I'm very proud to announce that Austin, over the last few months, has taken the 100 the most accessed articles from Ask the Scientist and has them translated now into Spanish, French, and Chinese. So we hope that helps you out. And a huge kudos to Austin for making that happen, and Kevin Guest, if you're in the room, I also lived up to my promise. I'd also like to acknowledge a couple other people from the team that I'm so fortunate to work with. So Russ Barton, I think most of you in this room know Russ. If you've ever sent a question through Ask the Scientist, Russ is the one who's normally answered your question. And He's coming up on 20 years with USANA, so just an invaluable resource. And you can meet Russ and Austin and the entire team over in Ask the Scientist booth. And then lastly is Toni McKinnon. She is absolutely amazing, and I'm so fortunate to work with her. She's been with USANA now for over 20 years. Right, over 20 years. And she was the original inventor and creator of Ask the Scientist. So when you see Toni over there in the booth, will you tell her thank you if you love this resource? She is absolutely amazing. So if you think about it, we have over a combined 55 years of experience just at USANA alone. So we are here to help you get your questions answered. So don't feel like if you don't get your questions answered this afternoon that you're out on your own. We are there for you. I hope everybody in this room is also following us on Facebook. Russ Barton does an amazing job putting out an article, at least one article, every single day where he's distilling down the health benefits of a healthy lifestyle, a healthy diet, and nutritional supplementation in a very easy and shareable manner. So if you're not one of the 35 or 36,000 people that's already following us, please, we encourage you to follow us on our Facebook page. So obviously connect with us on Facebook. AskTheScientist.info should be your first bookmark as it relates to USANA. And then Tony's also running an Instagram account for us. And if for whatever reason you'd like to connect with me, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Brian M. Dixon. So please get connected with us. We want to help you learn what may seem like all this complex material. So I'm here to talk to you about InCelligence. Were you guys as excited as I was this morning? Wasn't that a beautiful show this morning? Right? Actually, I can see him over there, but we have our vice president of USANA Studios over here on the right-hand side. I should say stage right-hand side, right? He put on that entire show with his very talented team. So could we give him a huge round of applause? Just amazing what those guys do. So we have literally been working on this for the last, 3, 4, 5 years even, you could say. And if you're like me, the last 2 years, we were really ingrained in InCelligence and Cell Essentials. And it probably, if I'm being completely honest, took me about 2 years to keep those two words straight. So if you only leave this presentation with one simple thing, and if you can remember that InCelligence is a technology platform, so it's not an individual product, it's not an individual ingredient, it's not even the same group of ingredients. It's a technology platform that we're going to leverage nutritionally, okay? Cell Essentials is the product. So if you can remember those two things, it's going to put you a year ahead and make you a year smarter than I am, I should say, or was. So hopefully I can keep them straight for this presentation. And what I want to talk about today is InCelligence. But to do that, I want to couch this conversation in just general human nutrition. So if I were to ask you, what are my 3 general categories of human nutrition, what do you think I would say? What would the first thing be? Right, if you've heard me speak before, and you've heard me say that there's only one product that you should be taking from our product line, what was that? The essentials. So when we're talking about human nutrition, the first aspect is those essential vitamins and minerals, and you can even say nutrients when we're talking about our foods line or the macronutrient line, but I want to focus this conversation on the micronutrients. So those essential vitamins and minerals, first aspect of human nutrition. What would be that second aspect of human nutrition? What was Dr. Wentz famous for? And what was that first essentials that came out? What were they famous for? Antioxidant protection, exactly. And then the third, anybody know? This one's going to be a little harder. I would call it additional nutritional support. So we know that there are a number of nutrients that we can get in our diet or through our nutritional supplement that, while they may not be essential for life, we know that they can yield a health benefit. So, what might that be, Brian? Well, things like lutein and zeaxanthin come to mind. So those carotenoids that live in our eyes can help improve our vision just a little bit, sharpen up our vision, and can also help us protect us against some age-related diseases later in life. I think about calcium, making sure you get calcium in optimal levels so that you're maximizing and optimizing your bone density. Maybe glucosamine could be another example. So not an essential nutrient by any means, but it's that building block for all that soft tissue that's in the joint and that connective tissues for the muscles. Okay, so that's what I mean by additional nutritional support. That's where the essentials started. That's where we dominated that space for 24 years. And now there's this fourth component of nutritional science. Any guesses what that might be? How about our new InCelligence technology? It's this fourth additional aspect of human nutrition. And this is where we are going to focus the conversation around today. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk about the science, but I'm not going to talk so deep on the science. And what I hope to do is tell you a story to help get across just how important this is, how important this technology is to help drive health benefits in the cell, which is going to help drive health benefits for our entire body. If you were paying close attention, look, there's going to be tests throughout this presentation. So if you were paying attention, what is that story? It's an open book test, cellular signaling. Okay, that story now is going to be cellular signaling. Now, there's no question this is scientific jargon, and if you know me at all, I hate jargon. But if you break those down individually, what do you see? You see cellular and signaling. And so when you look at those words individually, I think it becomes much easier, right? If you've been around USANA for a nanosecond, you're going to know what a cell is, right? And then what's signaling? Think of a traffic signal. It either tells you to stop or go. So that's exactly what cell signaling is. It's communication between cells, and it's communication inside of a cell. Simple, right? Until you start to look at how complicated it gets. So I have my degree in molecular biology, and this is something I would actually use in the laboratories when I'm doing experiments. So I would pull up one of these cell signaling networks so that I could actually conduct one of my experiments. So I would say, okay, I want to look at this protein or that protein or that protein, and I could figure out a cell signaling network in my experimental model. But is it fair to say that's incredibly complicated? And this is just one example of a cellular signaling network. When you start to lay these other networks on top of it, the complexity is just, it's absolutely mind-blowing. But somehow, inside of our cells, this whole thing works. I mean, isn't biology amazing? So, cell signaling, that's the new story. And that's the story I'm going to spend the first half of my talk on. And then I hope to give you some real-world examples that you can maybe relate a little better to, okay? So again, I want you to focus on these big concepts. There's going to be videos made available later on this week, if not early next week, that are going to have these presentations. You can go back and watch them again. We're going to make either this exact presentation available or something just like it to you all, so you don't have to worry about taking pictures or recording anything. Just sit back and take in and learn what you can, okay? So focus on those big concepts. And like I mentioned, I had a hard time keeping InCelligence and Cell Central straight for a long time. So I actually, when I was looking at that word, did anybody when they were taking their high school classes or their college classes, did you ever use mnemonics? I don't know if you know what mnemonics is, but you try to take the first letter from something you have to memorize, and you come up with a cute little saying so that hopefully you can remember it on test day, right? Like, I forget the one, but King Philip was from Great Spain or something, but kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? That's how I memorized all the classification system. So I looked at that word InCelligence and I thought, what does this mean to me? What do I see in that word? What's a cute little way I can come up with to remember what the InCelligence technology platform is? Well, when I look at the word, I see three things. I see in, and for me that meant inherent, and then I saw cell for cellular, and then I saw agents for intelligence, okay? So inherent cellular intelligence. And for me, this sums up everything. And you heard a lot in this morning's general session about the intelligence of the cell. And so that's exactly what I want to talk about now, the inherent cellular intelligence of our cell. If you've ever heard me speak before, you know I love definitions. I love to go back to the basics and start there. I was surprised when I actually found the definition for intelligence. It wasn't what I thought, and I think it's much different than how we think of intelligence. It's not about that guy or gal that's really good at memorizing a whole bunch of stuff in medical school and regurgitating it at test time. In fact, the definition is actually the ability to learn and understand things and deal with new and difficult situations. I mean, during my time in graduate school and working at the Linus Pauling Institute, I had lunches and dinners with many individuals who had won Nobel Prizes, sat with professors who were very accomplished in their field, and I tell you, there are a whole bunch of educated idiots out there. So you do not have to have a piece of paper to prove that you're intelligent. In fact, 3 of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, one was a logger, one laid tile, and one's a fly fishing guide out in Oregon. These guys, because they read so much, they love to talk to people, interact, they're worldly through their readings, are seriously the smartest people I've met in all of my world travels. So again, think about the definition of intelligence, and then start to think a little bit about that inherent cellular intelligence. So if we're talking about the cell, I think the next question we have to ask is, well, Brian, don't you have to have a brain to be intelligent? Let me ask you that question. Do you need a brain to be intelligent? Do you need a brain to interact and respond to your environment? Well, I patched together a few videos that I've found that I hope illustrate that inherent cellular intelligence that literally every cell on this planet contains. And my apologies to Sean McClellan and his team. I put this together, not USANA Studios. It's about 4 minutes long, and we're going to start with just a single-celled organism. You can see all the stuff going on inside of the cell, but can you also see how it's bumping around and changing directions? And I think it's clear to see and say that this single-celled organism is interacting with and responding to its environment. An amoeba spreading out, looking for food. Here you have a coordinated immune cell attack on a parasite. What? That's amazing. They don't have brains, but they know to attack this parasite. You have yeast that are growing and dividing. Think about when you put a seed in the ground. How do the roots know to grow down and the leaves know to grow up? They don't have brains, but yet they know how to do it. They even have little touch receptors to try to protect themselves, and over a period of time, they come back and start photosynthesizing again. How do sunflowers know to follow the sun throughout the day? Again, plants don't have brains, but how do they know? I think we've all seen bananas go rotten on our countertops, right? That's cell signaling happening. Look at this example. Something clearly without a brain, a plant, eating something with a primitive brain. These plants are feeding on an organism that's up in the food chain. Isn't that amazing? How do these ants know to follow a superhighway? These ants are following the superhighway to get back to the nest with pieces of leaf that they're actually going to farm for the fungus that decomposes that leaf. Think of a spider spinning a web. It's amazing architecturally, yet they know how to build these things to catch food that are their homes and even store food in times of abundance. They can even spin webs in different shapes. And I'm sorry if you're queasy around spiders. Sea stars, we think of them as just not moving, but in fact, they're moving around and interacting with their environment. And I love this example, an octopus. Watch when it comes in contact with the potential predator. Completely changes color. And then watch, it's going to mimic a fish to get away. Amazing. How does an octopus know? And then what I think, in a very primitive brain, is an incredibly complex behavior, is the dance of the bee. Think about her. She's coming back to the hive and is dancing, communicating or signaling where food is, how far, where to fly, and what that food source is, right? Are they thinking about this? But I think this is a clear example of intelligence. Look at the chameleon, changing colors. Is it thinking I need to be blue right now to stay safe? What about fish schooling? How do they know? Why do baby ducks follow their mom around? Why do we leverage dogs and black labs to be our hunting dogs, or otherwise just play with and fetch? How do they know? Even swimming behavior, and even animals we think that hate swimming can swim. How do they know? Why can most mammals walk literally as soon as they're born? How do they know? How do they know? It's that inherent cellular intelligence. Do you think that these sports analogies, are they thinking, oh, here comes the puck at 100 miles an hour, I better put my glove up? No, they're just reacting and responding to the environment that they're in. There's not time to process those signals in the speed it takes to work up and down our neurons. And then I love it when people tell me, I can't swim, Brian. We're all born with the inherent ability to hold our breath when we go underwater and even make swimming motions. Right? Did you know that? How do they know? Were they taught? Are their brains developed enough to be able to think about it? I say absolutely not. You do not need a brain to be intelligent. Do you know what the two most successful organisms are on the face of this earth? That not just outnumber us, but actually outweigh human beings in mass? It's bacteria and insects, right? There's more pounds of bacteria and insects on the face of this earth than there are human beings. Do they have complex brains? No, bacteria doesn't even have a brain at all. So no, you do not need a brain to be intelligent. Think about yourselves sitting here in this room. Are you thinking about that blood flowing through your arteries? Are you thinking about the impulses going up and down your nervous superhighway? Are you thinking about your breathing or digesting the lunch that you have? Are you thinking about remodeling your skeleton to keep it strong or building that muscle after a workout? See, all of these systems, all of these organ systems and tissues and cells, they're working outside of any mental capacity. How do they know? How do they know? If you've seen me speak before, you know I love to use the skin as an analogy. So this isn't a joke. There actually is some graphic content that's coming. So if you're squeamish with blood or cuts or anything, you might want to turn away for just a short minute. But I love to use the skin for an analogy because I think we can all see it and we can all relate to it. So has anybody in here ever cut their finger pretty bad? Yeah, I think we all have. Well, that's exactly what happened to this woman. So she cut her finger pretty bad, just with a kitchen knife. I promise there's a happy ending. Just relax. So she cut her finger pretty bad. And then what she did was over a period of time, she took pictures of that wound healing process. And I think a lot of people don't recognize or appreciate that that wound healing process is a very stepwise and coordinated process. It's obviously going to involve the skin cells, but it also very intimately involves our immune system as well. So let me ask you, when you cut your finger, are you thinking, heal, 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 heal? Come on, epithelial cells, grow and divide and make new ones. Come on, fibroblasts, reach out there and stretch and try to pull that wound together. No, right? The things are just happening by themselves. Our bodies are amazing. Our cells, I would argue, are even more amazing. But if you think back to those videos, what did everything have in common? What did everything have in common? Was it just luck? Was it maybe skill? Was it adaptation? Maybe you could argue, right? Part of the definition of intelligence. Luck, or I think most of us would call it instinct, right? A black lab instinctually knows how to fetch. A horse instinctively knows how to get up and walk after it's born. So for the sake of the upcoming conversation, let's just use instinct for the sake of argument, okay? So instinct. But what is instinct? What is instinct? Well, I'd argue that instinct is that thing that's embedded inside of our DNA and our genes, okay? So if we can unlock that instinct and unlock that potential, wow, think of that power. What if we could get up and walk right when we're born, right? But let's clear up just a little bit of terms, just so we're all on the same page. So a little bit of bad biology coming your way. But DNA and genes, I think we throw these words around, but we may not 100% know what they are or what they mean. Right? We have our cell, and inside of that cell, we've got another little compartment we call the nucleus. And really, for the most part, the job of that nucleus is to house and protect all of our DNA. And our DNA is amazing. There is so much of it wrapped up in this tiny little microscopic nucleus. It's going to blow your mind. If I were to reach into a cell, pull out that DNA, and stretch it out on a table, it would be somewhere between 3 to 6 feet long, or 1 to 2 meters long. All of that is wrapped back on itself, packaged up into that nucleus. So think about that DNA now, stretched out on that table. What a gene is just a small piece of that DNA that's instructions for the cell to do something, okay? DNA and genes. Another analogy I like, and I kind of get nightmares when I think about all the time I spent at the libraries back at Oregon State and the Linus Pauling Institute, but I like to think of DNA and genes as the rows and rows and rows in the library. So the rows would be like all of that DNA that's coiled up in that nucleus. A gene would be like me pulling a book off of that shelf and opening it up, and there's the information that I need. Now what happens if I have all this DNA, but I never reach in and open up that book? Is information ever going to get conveyed to me? No. So our bodies, our cells, have to turn on these genes for something to happen, to unlock that instinct, if you will, of the cell, or that inherent cellular intelligence. So let's think about DNA for just a second. Now, scientists will debate this and they'll debate me afterwards, but would you say DNA is an active or a passive molecule? How many people say active? And how many people say passive? About 50-50. I like to think of DNA as being a passive molecule, and here's why. I worked in a laboratory, in a genetics laboratory, and one of the projects going on in that laboratory was a gentleman was going out to archaeological sites, and he was gathering all of these stone tools. And he was coming back to the laboratory and very scientifically washing off those stone tools. But what was he doing, and what was he looking for? Well, what these archaeologists, what the people that wanted to discover the old stuff did, they wanted to find out what were these ancient civilizations eating, maybe who were they even waging war against. So I don't know if you've ever seen, an old stone tool like the tip of a spear or maybe an arrowhead, but it's really, most of them are made out of glass rock, and they're just incredibly smooth and incredibly sharp. But what they could do is once that arrowhead or stone tool went through, let's say, a deer or some other animal, little pieces of blood are going to dry down in these microscopic cracks. So then what this gentleman from this genetics laboratory was doing was isolating the DNA from these stone tools that, oh, by the way, were thousands, if not tens of thousands of years old, to find out who were these ancient civilizations eating and who were they waging war against. So DNA is an incredibly stable molecule, incredibly stable. In fact, IT professionals right now are looking to DNA to store data very, very long term. Nothing that man can create is as stable as DNA. So that's why I say DNA is a passive molecule. And another analogy I like to use is one of a blueprint. Is it fair to say there's a ton of information in that blueprint? Yes. But can that blueprint, can that piece of paper actually build that house? No way. Absolutely not. It takes a skilled worker to be able to read that blueprint that then has to direct an army of workers to construct that house. So that's like what our DNA is. It's full of information, but unless you get the right things and the right people building the house, it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. So just to stay on this DNA analogy for a little bit longer, the names in this animation don't matter. But what I want you to see is that there are things that are binding to that DNA that are basically taking an unusable message or an unusable blueprint and, like a typewriter, working its way down that DNA and turning it into a usable message that the cell can use. Okay? But then let me ask you the question. Who are those workers? What were those things that were binding to that DNA? Any guesses? What does literally all of the work inside of our cell? It turns out it's enzymes, proteins. Okay? Enzymes and proteins are the workers of the cell. But who or what is directing those workers in the cell? What do you guys think? Who's directing those workers? Well, it turns out it's cellular signaling. It's the communication that's going on inside of the cell. It's the coordinated cellular signaling that's directing those workers to have some cellular consequence occur inside of that cell. Very simply put, you have A that happens, and then B, and then C, and then D, and then some cellular consequence, however long that causal chain is. It's literally that simple, and that's cell signaling in a nutshell. So if we come back to my very complicated molecular biology diagram, what if I did something like this? What if I just went A, then B, then C, then D, and then ultimately, like you can see on the bottom of that schematic, proliferation, glucose metabolism, you have some cellular consequence. It's amazing how all of this works. Absolutely amazing. Okay, so cell signaling coordinates all of those workers. It's kind of what's directing who to go where and what to do what. But what is initiating those cellular signaling pathways? Any guesses? What's initiating those? Well, it turns out it's receptors. So think of receptors as nothing more than just sensors. Okay, so sensors, they're just waiting there for the right thing to bind to it, and then something's going to happen. And that something happens to be initiating cellular signaling cascades. Okay? And just a little bit of scientific wonkery, but we have both direct and indirect receptors. So something directly is binding to it, or there's some maybe indirect sensing that's going on by these receptors. But all I want you to remember is receptors. Receptors initiate cellular signaling. So you can even see on the top of the schematic, it says cytokine receptor. So the word cytokine is not important, it's just a chemical. So you have a chemical that's binding to a specific chemical at A. A initiates B, B initiates C, C initiates D, ... cellular consequence. And that's how our cells work in a nutshell. But like I showed you, it's very, very complicated. A couple analogies I'm going to throw at you. The first one, a very American analogy, but these receptors are literally like a cocked and loaded gun, right? A very small input can have tragic and huge consequences, right? Or maybe another analogy, if you're not American or against guns, how about something like a receptor, or excuse me, a lock and a key being a receptor, right? If I were to pull out my keys out of my pocket, I'd have a whole slew of keys on there, right? But only one of those keys is actually going to unlock my car door and start it up. Maybe the analogy I like the best is one of dominoes. Okay, so think of a chain of dominoes that ultimately have some terminal consequence. So I've got another little video. I don't know, maybe you lived the most sheltered childhood in the world, but I think everyone here knows what dominoes looks like and has set them up and knocked them over. But look, here we have one small little input that's going to knock over one domino. One domino then is going to start a chain of two, and then ultimately there's going to be some consequence that's going to happen. Okay, so bink, small little input. You have this chain starts racing down around the corner, and then one domino will ultimately knock down all of those dominoes. Okay, some cellular or terminal consequence in the cell. So as that cartoon alludes to, there can even be signal amplification through these cell signaling pathways. So another way we can think about that is in this video. So here, this professor has set up a chain of increasingly larger and larger dominoes. That first domino probably only weighs a gram or two, right? Far less than an ounce. He's going to push over that one small domino that ultimately is going to push over that last domino that weighs about 50 kilograms or well over 100 pounds, okay? So this is how you can get signal amplification through cell signaling pathways. Tiny little input with a huge cellular consequence. And again, maybe a real-world analogy I can give you is, are there any women in here on birth control? Don't answer out loud. But are there any women on here on birth control, or do you know what it is? Or think about that big meathead in the gym who's shooting himself up with steroids, right? A tiny little pill can completely remodel a female's reproductive physiology, right? A tiny little injection can make a man put on non-physiological amounts of muscle. A tiny little input with a massive consequence. And this is the power of leveraging cell signaling. This is the power of leveraging cell signaling to coordinate cellular health, to coordinate that cellular intelligence. So I hope you guys are with me so far. Now, let me ask you, what would then be the purpose of these cell signaling pathways? Think about that definition of intelligence. It's simply to react and respond to both its internal and external environment. So, can a single cell be intelligent? I say absolutely. Can a primitive organism like a plant or an insect be intelligent? I say absolutely yes. So again, at high speed, that video I showed you, but think about what all of these video clips have in common. Think about what they all have in common. They are all examples of whatever organism or human is interacting with at that time in their environment, initiating these cell signaling pathways where something's going to happen inside of us, okay? So that's my kind of introduction to cellular signaling. And again, it's nothing more complicated than starting at a receptor, A, a causal chain, B, then C, then D, and then some cellular consequence. But now what I hope to do is give you those 3 world examples that I was talking about, those 3 real-world USANA examples that we're talking about. And I want to do it with the immune system, exercise-induced discomfort, and then detoxification, okay? You guys with me so far? I hope I'm not overwhelming you too badly. But let's start with the immune system. Our immune system is amazing. And when it comes to our immune system and our protection against the outside world, this is actually the definition of the immune system. It's a coordinated system of cells, proteins, and chemical signals that function to fend off the outside world. Right? That's obviously a definition of just one small part of what our immune system does. But when we're talking about fending off the outside world, it's a perfect definition. And really, what's so amazing about our immune system is it can be turned on and it can be turned off. So think about that for just a minute. When you want your immune system on, you want it on. But when you want your immune system off, you definitely want it off. So my first analogy here, we're going to talk about an example where you might want your immune system turned on, okay? I'm going to show you yet another video, and this happens to be an immune cell hunting down a bacteria. So yeah, neutrophil, again, another scientific word, but just think of that big blob in the middle as being the immune cell. To orientate yourself, those rounder blobs are red blood cells, and then the scientists put some bacteria in this microscope slide. Just through the kinetic energy that's vibrating through the water in that microscope slide, that bacteria is kind of wiggling its way around. But look how that immune cell can literally chase, turn directions, right? Turn directions again, turn right, turn left, until it ultimately gives that bacteria a huge bear hug, engulfs it, and is going to spew out all of these nasty chemicals that will ultimately kill that bacteria. Isn't that amazing? Right? Is there a brain in that bacteria? Is there a nerve connected to that bacteria? No, that bacteria, or excuse me, that immune cell is acting independently. It's amazing. And so our immune system is really nothing more than chemical warfare, right? At its very simplest, nothing more than chemical warfare. That immune cell could literally smell that bacteria in that microscope slide. Like how would that work? Well, it's very similar to how moths or butterflies mate, right? A female moth will go high in a tree and she'll emit a plume of pheromones. And take my word for it, that male moth or male butterfly is very uniquely equipped to smell her pheromones. He'll follow that pheromone cloud back to the female moth or butterfly, And I think we all know that they'll make baby butterflies, right? Or if it helps, right, think about those ants on the superhighway, right? They're working through literally smelling these pheromones that have been laid out on the ground. But again, independently of any sort of complex brain. Then, you might ask yourself, so okay, I see how that immune cell was able to track down that bacteria, but how do they actually kill it? Well, it turns out our immune cells can actually make the same things that are produced during extreme oxidation, like this bonfire, or the chemicals produced during a nuclear reaction, if you can believe that. And in fact, here is that signaling, okay? Complex signaling pathways and chemical reactions that will actually make very toxic compounds that'll kill bacteria. Anybody recognize any compounds on the screen? If I said the common name, you would. HOCl, that's actually bleach, right? Our immune cells can make bleach. Do we use bleach to clean our countertops? Yeah. H2O2, anyone know that one? Hydrogen peroxide. Do we use hydrogen peroxide to clean our cuts? Maybe when we cut our finger in the kitchen? Yes, absolutely. A number of other very toxic compounds that these immune cells can make to ultimately kill a foreign invader. So, what if there was a product that could leverage this chemical warfare, or I should say maybe even better, what if there was a product that could leverage this cellular signaling to help support our immune health? Wouldn't that be great? Well, you heard the announcement today, but ProGlucamune is going worldwide, right? So ProGlucamune, your everyday immune support, now made with InCelligence. It's an amazing product, and let's talk about how InCelligence is working through these cell signaling cascades. So, the mechanism by which ProGlucamune is working is called priming. So think about if you've had a pump, you can't just pump air to then pump water. You first have to prime the pump. So you have to put water into the system to get that pump working so you can ultimately get water out. Okay, so the mechanism by which ProGlucamune is working is called priming. And what is priming? Well, priming is that first contact with one of those foreign invaders or other chemical signals that will basically take a passive or sleeping immune cell and wake it up and put it in a heightened state. Okay, that's priming. So once that immune cell gets primed, it becomes active and better equipped to do its job. An analogy I like is think of priming as being like having to take 2 locks off of a gate. If you already have that first lock off of the gate, you're going to be able to much more quickly get inside of that gate. Okay, so priming is like removing that first lock so that immune cell can go about its job much more quickly. So here in this example, I pulled up some immune signaling. Okay, and this is exactly how priming is working. You've got something that's initiating a receptor at A is telling B, B is telling C, C is telling D, and then you have the cellular consequence, and that's making that cell become in that heightened state. So how does ProGlucamune work? Well, what we are doing, besides the other great nutrient support that's in ProGlucamune, what we're really leveraging when it comes to the cell signaling are things called beta-glucans. And beta-glucans are these chemicals that live in the cell walls of mushrooms and yeast. Okay? So when we take in either mushrooms from our diet or through ProGlucamune, what's happening is that ProGlucamune is being absorbed at a specific part of our digestive system. It's then absorbed again via a very specific population of immune cells. Those immune cells take those beta-glucans, metabolize them, right? Chop them up into small little pieces and excrete them back out into our bodies and into circulation. It turns out that those metabolites from those first immune cells actually will bind to receptors, prime it, and bring that immune cell into its heightened state. Pretty amazing. So here's just another cartoon of what I just said. We take in those oral beta-glucans, they get absorbed by a specific population of immune cells, metabolized into small little pieces. Those pieces are excreted. They bind to those receptors on the outside of those other immune cells, again, bringing it to that heightened state. And then lastly, if you're even more visual than I am, here's just a quick little cartoon. That ingestion showing the absorption of those beta-glucans in a very specific part of our digestive system, absorbed by this specific immune cell. Those immune cells secreting those metabolites binding to those outside receptors on those cell membranes of those passive immune cells, priming them so that they can then go on to do what immune cells love to do. Isn't that cool? By leveraging cell signaling, we can support a healthy immune system. Absolutely amazing and a wonderful product. The second thing I want to talk about, exercise-induced discomfort. Has everybody in here ever worked out? I hope everybody's worked out. And are you more sore the first day or the second day after you've worked out? In harmony, the second day, right? But do you know why that is? That's right. It's called DOMS. A very smart gentleman sitting here in the front. It's called DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And it turns out that that's the result of our immune system. What? Our immune system can actually work against us, right? So what happens when we exercise is we start to mechanically rupture whatever muscle it was that we're working out. And remember I was talking about those chemicals that immune cells can smell? Well, some of those chemicals just naturally live inside of our cells. Again, it's just a beautiful system. Because as those cells rupture, it releases those chemicals. Those chemicals then circulate throughout our bodies, and they basically whistle to our immune system that, hey, we have a problem in the leg, we better send some soldiers there to check out what's going on. Because usually when cells are rupturing, they're rupturing for a bad reason. So our body mounts an immune response to that damaged muscle tissue. So then it takes about 24 hours to recruit those immune cells. Those immune cells then start spewing out those very nasty chemicals, that bleach, that hydrogen peroxide, the others. Those then further go on to damage our muscles, and the damage increases, and that's why we're more sore the second day. So that's an example of our bodies actually working against us, right? So when we're talking about a healthy immune system, clearly we want the immune system on when we want it on, but clearly we also want it off when we want it off, okay? So we need to talk about maintaining a healthy, balanced inflammatory response. But if you're a normal individual and you go to the gym and maybe you get so sore you can't even sit on the toilet, you've got to kind of do one of these in the morning, right? I think we've all been there, right? Kind of have to hover. So what would most people reach for to help with that exercise-induced discomfort? They'd probably go into their bathroom cabinet and reach for those red, white, and blues, right? But you really thought about how those are working? Is it through cellular signaling? What do you think? And would it be an activation of cellular signaling, or would it be an inhibition of cellular signaling? Well, let's talk about it for a second. So here's our immune network again. A, then B, then C, then D, and then some consequence. So if we're talking about exercise-induced discomfort, do we really want that massive cellular consequence to happen? No. So what if we could break this causal chain, and instead of going all the way to that cellular consequence, what if we could nip it in the bud somewhere along the way and keep that cellular consequence from occurring? That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? So this is actually how a lot of this is happening. So our bodies will make those chemical signals that our immune cells can smell, usually metabolized from fats. And you can see on this chart, you can see there's two examples of anti-inflammatory metabolism, and there's two examples of pro-inflammatory metabolism, right? So it's those chemicals that are going to induce those cellular signals inside of our immune system that maybe we don't always want, right? Because we're a little bit out of balance. So what if we could leverage and dictate and maybe tip something in balance one way or another? Maybe we could knock down or attenuate just a little bit those pro-inflammatory markers and keep that signaling from happening. And that's exactly what those red, white, and blues are doing. But what's happening with those things we're reaching for is they tend to work on only one very specific enzyme or location in the cell, right? But what if we could just think about restoring that entire balance. And instead of hitting one enzyme hard, we kind of just had a nice, subtle, healthy response, a balanced response in our immune system to bring everything back to where it should be. We call homeostasis. So, right, maintaining a healthy immune response. So before we get into the product that may help with that, let's talk about some of the lifestyle factors that you can do to also help attenuate some of that exercise-induced muscle soreness. Well, you can obviously maintain a healthy weight, and other than just sore muscles, there's so many health benefits. If there's one thing you want to do to improve your health, get down to and maintain a healthy body weight, please. Got a whole nother lecture on that. But maintain a healthy body weight. Regular exercise, right? The training effect. The more we work out, the more we train, the better equipped our bodies are, the more resilient our bodies are, and the less we're going to be susceptible to that harmful effects of exercise. Limit overuse. Listen to what your body's doing. Listen to when it's telling you to stop. Don't overdo it. Ease into an exercise program. Adequate recovery. I think we get just so motivated, whether January 1st or whenever it is we decide to embark on our new exercise programs. We want to hit the gym hard, and we want to hit it every single day. But a recovery day or two during the week can actually be your best friend. Overtraining is tragic and actually has the opposite effect of what we hope to obtain from exercise. And then, of course, diet, right? All the things we hear about all the time. Eat your fruits and vegetables, eat healthy proteins, and omega-3s, right? Those healthy fats that come from especially fish oil can have great benefits. And then, lastly, there's that additional nutritional support. That vitamin D, that vitamin C, the manganese, the glucosamine, or the turmeric or curcumin, depending on how you like to say it. Well, geez, if only there was a product that could kind of harness most of that additional nutritional support. Well, introducing the new branded USANA's Precosa, right? Now made with InCelligence technology, okay? So as most of you know, Precosa, a unique blend of vitamin C and manganese. And something interesting about vitamin C, it's been shown over and over and over again in the scientific literature that high doses of vitamin C can actually help attenuate that exercise-induced muscle soreness. So what's happening is, as that immune cell gets to the site of that damaged muscle, vitamin C actually gets in the way and helps absorb some of those nasty chemicals that are being spewed by those immune cells. So vitamin C, obviously in there for its antioxidant properties, but it's also a cofactor for collagen synthesis. So trying to do everything we can to help support all that soft tissue, both in the joints and then also the connective tissues of the muscles, okay? Manganese is also an enzymatic cofactor that helps us build those building blocks of all of those soft tissues. Glucosamine, you have to get at least 1,500 milligrams per day to see the health benefit. So of course, Precosa has that 1,500 milligrams per day, but also very important, it's vegetarian-based. Okay, this is a differentiator, another differentiator for USANA's Precosa. It's vegetarian. So most glucosamine is derived from clam shells and shrimp shells. And so ours is yeast-based, and so not just the glucosamine, but the entire Precosa product is vegetarian-friendly. And then lastly, and this is where we kind of get back into that cell signaling and bringing back that healthy balance of the immune system, but it's especially that turmeric or the curcumin that's in Precosa, and oh, by the way, the special formulation of turmeric or curcumin that's in Precosa, that we call Mariva, that actually increases the bioavailability somewhere between 20 to 60 times normal traditional formulations of turmeric. It's absolutely amazing, because if something can't get absorbed, it can't get to where it needs to in the body, and if it can't get to where it needs to be in the body, it cannot have its health benefit. But what's so great about curcumin or turmeric is it's been shown to help rebalance out those signals that our bodies are producing to bring back that natural, healthy balance into our immune system. Again, just another amazing product that people seem to feel literally within the first day, 2 or 3 of taking the product. I love it. And I love this quote by Brian Fletcher, right, from the U.S. ski team. The body is a resilient machine, and I think we've been talking about that today in quite detail. But it can use some help. which is why I make sure to give my body the time it needs to recover between competitions, right? We were talking about recovery and how important that is. Supplying it with the right nutrients, again, everything we've been talking about. And then Mr. Fletcher loves Percosa. So by getting the right nutrients and supplements, including USANA's Percosa, he is getting those health benefits. He's getting that competitive edge that he needs to go on and win Olympic medals. So that's Percosa, and again, you're going to see that now branded with that made in InCelligence and the new logo, which, by the way, isn't that beautiful? So kudos to the marketing team as well for coming up with yet another beautiful logo and branding for us. Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is detoxification. And this one is really, really close to my heart. I studied detoxification very thoroughly during my graduate studies, and especially as it relates to aging. So detoxification, I'm sorry, another definition, but the definition of detoxification is to remove a harmful substance or the effect of such substance and render it less harmless. So whether that's just metabolizing the toxin that's entered the cell or even removing it completely, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about detoxification. Just like our immune system, our detoxification pathways can be turned on and they can be turned off. Well, why is that important? Well, it's important because they are also initiated through cellular signaling. So let's say when that insult, that stress, or that toxin enters the cell, it's going to elicit a response. So it turns out our cells can sense when they are stressed, right? So let's say maybe it's protein A that can sense when it's stressed. It will tell protein B, tell protein C, protein D, and then there's going to be some cellular consequence. But to break it down even more simply, right, when a toxin enters a cell, protein A is going to sense that. It's literally going to bind to it. It's going to know it. Protein A cannot keep a secret. Tells protein B tells protein C. Protein C goes into the nucleus, pulls one of those books off of the shelf, turns on those anti-stress or detoxification genes. Those genes then get made into a message the cell can understand, turned into an anti-stress or detoxification protein, and then that protein works back on that stress to detoxify it. It's amazing how this system works. There is a couple of problems. Two of those problems are there's a time delay. So what do I mean by that? It actually takes time for those genes to be turned on, and from the time that stress has entered the cell and it's sensed till the time the genes are turned on, till the proteins are made, until they can go back and work on that stress. So there's a time lag, and that can be from just a couple of hours to even a couple of days. So during that time lag, that damage can go on inside of the cell. So what we want to try to do is shorten that time lag so that our body's detoxification pathways can work as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then you can also lose the response. So you can literally burn out that detoxification pathway. And what do I mean by that? I think we all have that buddy who can drink a ton of alcohol, right? And if you don't have that friend, then it's probably you. But, right, we all know that guy who can just drink a ton of alcohol, right? But what's going to happen if they just keep drinking that pint of alcohol every single day? You're going to overwhelm your body's natural ability to detoxify that alcohol, and you become susceptible to cirrhosis of the liver. Okay, considered a disease of alcohol consumption. So you can literally burn out those pathways. Another example of how you can lose that response is just through the natural aging process. So we actually lose the ability to respond to stresses and toxins as we get older. So my background, like I mentioned, was in aging. And I've got the reference down here, but this was some experiments that we actually did in a laboratory, in Dr. Hagen's laboratory. So I want you to put your scientific hats on and your scientific lab coats on for a second, and I want you to help me to design an experiment. Okay? So if we wanted to test whether or not we lose that detoxification capacity with age, what could we do? What would we need to start with? You'd have to start with cells exactly, and since we're doing an aging study, we'd want to start with young cells, and we want to start with old cells. We would just simply put them in a test tube, and then what could we do? You'd start adding the chemicals or the stress or the insult, whatever it is you wanted to test, and then you'd want to measure the response. What's probably the easiest response to measure? You don't even have to have all this molecular biology background. You could just measure whether or not these cells are living or they're dying after their exposure to the toxin. Okay, are you guys with me? Young cells, old cells in a test tube, we'll apply a toxin to them and we'll count how many cells are dead after each increasing exposure. Okay, this was exactly the experiment Professor Hagen did in the laboratory, and look what he found. When we put that first lowest concentration of toxins inside of the cell, it killed about 25% of the young cells. Oh, sorry, the old cells, excuse me. That first dose of toxin killed about 25% of those old cells. It wasn't until we got to that next concentration where you start to see some mortality in the young cells, and then you can see the result where at the highest concentration we killed almost all of those old cells. Now, what toxicologists like to do are calculate what's called the LC50, or the lethal concentration whereby 50% of the cells die. So when we calculate that LC50, what we see is that those old cells are literally twice as susceptible to that toxin than those young cells. Okay? A clear example in this experimental model of how we've lost that response as we got older. Okay? But what if you could actually turn on those detoxification pathways? Well, guess what the scientific literature has showed us? That there are specific nutrients that can actually tell protein A to tell protein B to tell protein C that, hey, let's make some of these anti-stress or detoxification proteins. But because specific nutrients are maybe non-toxic or definitely far less toxic than those insults we're exposed to every single day, those proteins don't have to go back and work on that stress or that toxin. They can just kind of swim around the cell and be on patrol so that when a toxin does enter the cell, it can jump on it more quickly. It's amazing, right? So, if we come back to our experiment, and I wanted to test the hypothesis that specific nutrients can help turn on our detoxification pathways, what would I do? What would I do? How about this? What if I took some of those old cells and incubated them, right, pre-treated them with some of these specific nutrients, and then exposed them to the toxin, right? That would be the experiment. Well, it's exactly what Professor Hagen did, and after he pre-treated these old cells with these specific nutrients, look what he found. He was actually able to make those old cells young again as it relates to their detoxification capacity. It's amazing. And that's leveraging the cell signaling as it relates to detoxification in our bodies. So it was those nutrients that were turning on our body's natural detoxification defenses that conveyed that protection to those old cells. And there are many, many of these compounds that we know can promote our body's natural detoxification, can promote liver health, etc. So if only there was a product that could help turn on our body's natural detoxification pathways. And I think we all know what that would be, right? Hepasil DTX. And like I mentioned, this product is very close to my heart. It was one of the first major projects I worked on in my time at USANA, leveraging actually a lot of the work I had done during graduate school. And so Hepasil is an amazing product, and I'm so proud to have been a part of the development team that came up with Hepasil. And one reason I'm so proud is in a human clinical study we did in the laboratories at USANA, we were able to show that by taking Hepasil, you were able to increase both your antioxidant protection and your detoxification capacity. And so it was the novel formulation, right, leveraging the hybrid technology, and also the health benefits that we saw with the product, where we were able to file 2 US patents on this product. Now, do you remember at the very beginning of my talk when I said we'd been thinking about this technology for years and years and years? Can anyone see the date on that patent? 2013. This is how long we've been thinking about leveraging that cell signaling that's inherent in our bodies. And it's not until today that we've been able to now put a bow around all of it and put a stake in the ground that we're going to continue to be the world leader in nutritional science and now leveraging, with this InCelligence technology, these cell signaling pathways. Right? Amazing. And so by adding this fourth aspect, right, InCelligence technology, we are able to positively affect health outcomes. We're able to leverage the inherent cellular intelligence to beneficially increase the health of the cell, which in turn will increase the health of our overall bodies. And if you were to ask me in a nutshell, what is InCelligence technology? Very simply put, I would say USANA is now leveraging nutrition to positively affect cellular signaling pathways to elicit a positive health or cellular response, right? Amazing. So I hope you guys are as excited as I am. It's going to be in the products I mentioned, as well as the Cell Essentials, and obviously in the Health Pack, and this is just the beginning. So thank you guys very, very much again for coming out to hear what I had to say.